Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. Every Sunday, I used to look forward to football at Jason's place, a routine that once symbolized a shared joy with my buddies and a welcome break from the grind of work as a private investigator. Over time, however, I began to notice that these gatherings were no longer just about the game. They had slowly morphed into arenas where my wife, Lauren, seemed to wield her words as weapons, undermining my confidence with a casual cruelty that cut deeper than any tackle on the field. I would sit in the back of the room, trying to focus on the game while Lauren floated about, her laughter echoing a bit too loudly and her comments aimed in my direction with a sly insinuation. One Sunday, as the guys cheered a touchdown, I overheard her remark to one of our friends, "Some men are built for watching football all day. Others are built for something more, but I guess some men just can't handle both." Her tone was light, as if she were making a harmless joke, yet the sting of her words left me reeling. My heart pounded with a mix of humiliation and confusion. Was this another instance of her deliberate habit of making me feel small? I tried to dismiss it as nothing more than a poorly timed quip, but the memory of it clung to me long after the cheers had faded. At a family barbecue a few weeks later, our relatives gathered in the backyard for a festive afternoon. As I helped set the table, Lauren took the opportunity to recount one of her networking stories from work. In her animated tone, she mentioned how she had single-handedly organized a major event while I watched from the sidelines. My contributions, it seemed, always reduced to a mere footnote in her tale of success. I could feel every eye on me, every smirk and sideways glance from family members who had once seen me as a supportive husband and father. I mean, not everyone could be as ambitious as I am. She laughed casually, completely oblivious to how her words made me shrink inside. That evening, as the laughter and clinking of glasses filled the air, I sat on the porch in silence, my mind a whirlwind of self-doubt and suppressed pain. I remembered the way her voice had dripped with condescension and how her eyes had sparkled with mischief at my expense. My inner monologue screamed, "You deserve better. You deserve respect." But the weight of our shared history kept me silent. I kept replaying that moment. Her words, the laughter of our guests, and my own growing sense of insignificance. I wondered if I should finally speak up, demand the respect I'd earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. Yet, even as that thought surfaced, I felt trapped, unable to break free from the pattern that had become our life. I recalled another instance, a family reunion where I had been assigned to help the kids with a game, only to have Lauren remark, "It's cute how he always thinks he's the hero at home." Her tone was mocking, and it was as if she intended to remind everyone that I was nothing more than a side character in our story. That day, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the voices of our relatives turned to hushed conversations, I realized that the wounds she inflicted were not physical but emotional, eating away at my sense of self bit by bit. I sat there, battling the urge to let my pain erupt into a confrontation, my mind torn between enduring the silence and demanding an acknowledgement of my worth. The unanswered question lingered. How long could I allow these moments to define me? I arrived at our regular Sunday gathering with a heavy heart, the memory of last week's humiliation still burning inside me. The venue was familiar, a cozy living room at a close friend's place, where a group of us had gathered to cheer on our team and catch up on life. I tried to focus on the game, but every laugh, every shared glance reminded me of the jabs Lauren had thrown at my expense over the past few months. Today, however, things took a turn I hadn't anticipated. As the halftime whistle blew, the chatter in the room shifted, and Lauren's voice rang out, sharp and taunting. "Oh, come on, isn't it obvious? Some people are made for the spotlight, and some are just meant to be background extras," she declared, her tone light, but laced with venom. The room fell silent for a moment, then a few snickers spread among our friends. I felt my stomach twist in anger and humiliation, each word a fresh blow to the pride I had long tried to salvage. I could see the smug satisfaction in her eyes as she continued. "I mean, I'm out there making connections, while some of us can barely even manage our own living room." I clenched my fists, every muscle tensing as I struggled to contain the anger that had been building inside me for so long. For years, I had been the silent supporter, the one who stayed in the background, taking on the role of the dependable husband and provider, while Lauren made sure everyone remembered that I was simply not enough. My mind raced with images of every time she had dismissed my ideas, every offhand remark that reduced my efforts to mere insignificance. "That's enough, Lauren," I finally snapped, my voice echoing in the sudden hush that had descended upon the room. My outburst was unexpected, a crack in the calm facade I had maintained all these years. "Excuse me," she retorted, her voice dripping with condescension as she tilted her head, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "You think you could just burst in here and change the narrative?" "I'm just telling the truth," she said dismissively, as if my feelings were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. The tension in the room was palpable, every eye fixed on us as the atmosphere shifted from jovial to charged with uncomfortable silence. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "The truth is, I'm tired," I said quietly but firmly, tired of watching my worth be diminished with every careless remark. "I've sacrificed so much for this family, yet every contribution I make is twisted into a joke." The room was silent for what felt like an eternity, the weight of my words hanging in the air. One of our friends, trying to break the tension, murmured, "Maybe we should all take a moment to reflect," but the suggestion only deepened the disquiet. I could see the flicker of uncertainty in some of their eyes, and it spurred me on. "I'm not asking for apologies," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I'm asking for respect. I'm not some prop in your story, Lauren. I'm your partner, and I deserve to be seen as more than just a background character in your life." Her eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I thought I saw a crack in her bravado. "You always make a big deal out of nothing," she snapped, though her tone wavered slightly. That was the exact moment when I realized that our relationship, built on years of neglect and degradation, had finally reached a breaking point. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow as I recognized that my long-held silence had finally been shattered. In that charged silence, as whispers began to circulate among our friends, I knew that the sacrifices I had made were no longer a source of pride, but had been twisted into a tool for her amusement. I left that day feeling both defeated and strangely empowered, a cocktail of emotions that promised that something had to change. I walked out of that room with the painful realization that my identity was no longer something I could hide behind. And as I stepped into the cool afternoon air, I resolved that I would no longer allow my worth to be measured by someone else's cruelty. I had begun noticing subtle changes long before the full truth became undeniable. Sundays, once a joyful time for football and friendly banter at Jason's house, had taken on a different, more sinister hue. Every week, as the game hit halftime, Lauren would excuse herself with a casual, "I'm just going to grab some more beer from the garage fridge," and vanish without a trace. At first, I believed her. After all, the excitement of the game and the camaraderie with the guys made it easy to ignore fleeting doubts. But as the weeks passed, those small disappearances piled up in my mind, leaving behind a residue of suspicion that I could no longer dismiss. One overcast afternoon, when the house was eerily quiet and I found myself alone with my thoughts, I decided to tackle some cleaning in the guest room. It was a room that Lauren always kept tidy, yet curiously locked away from prying eyes, as if it held secrets meant only for her. As I sorted through a stack of old magazines and folded linens, I discovered a small, unmarked wooden box wedged behind a shelf. My curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly opened it to reveal a neatly wrapped package. My heart skipped a beat as I carefully unwrapped the gift, a sleek, expensive watch that exuded elegance and sophistication, a far cry from anything we'd ever purchased together. The engraving on the back bore a name that was entirely foreign to me. For a long moment, I stood frozen in disbelief, my mind reeling from the shock. How could Lauren, who had always spoken about her modest life, as if it were enough, suddenly be hiding such a luxurious item? I recalled the countless instances where she'd taken extra phone calls, and the way her eyes would light up with secretive glee whenever she slipped away from our Sunday gatherings. The realization began to form slowly like a dark storm cloud. This wasn't a forgotten gift or a misdelivered package. It was evidence of a hidden life, a life where her absence was not merely an innocent errand, but a prelude to something far more painful. I whispered to myself, "How could you do this?" as the bitter taste of betrayal flooded through me. My hands trembled as I examined every detail of the watch. The impeccable craftsmanship, the smooth, cold metal, and the precision of its design. Each element seemed deliberately chosen to impress, to convey that this wasn't an ordinary purchase, but a token of affection meant for someone else. In that moment, every casual dismissal and every mocking remark she had hurled at me during our gatherings became painfully clear, a calculated effort to belittle me and to justify her own hidden agenda. I felt anger, deep and searing, mingling with the grief of knowing that the trust one had built over years was now shattered. But I also realized that I couldn't confront her impulsively, not yet. I needed to be sure, to gather undeniable proof before facing the painful reality of her betrayal. With great care, I placed the watch back into its box exactly as I had found it, determined to preserve it as evidence rather than discard it in a moment of rash anger. Sitting at my desk afterwards, I opened my journal and began to document every detail. The time of discovery, the condition of the box, every emotion that surged through me in that single heart-wrenching moment. "I will uncover every lie," I wrote, "and reclaim the dignity that has been stripped from me." Each word was a promise to myself, a vow that I would no longer be the silent victim of Lauren's covert deceptions. As I closed my journal, the watch in its box symbolized the turning point of my life. I understood now that the painful truth behind Lauren's late-night absences and the whispered conversations over the phone was about to be exposed piece by piece. The knowledge that she had been living a double life stung like a bitter injection, yet it also ignited a spark of resolve within me. I knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges and heartache, but I was no longer willing to let my life be dictated by lies. I resolved that I would gather every shred of evidence, every hidden clue, until the full extent of her deception was laid bare for all to see. In that quiet, solitary moment, I embraced the painful truth and the promise of reclaiming my self-respect, determined to step out of the shadows of deceit and into a future defined by honesty and personal strength. In the wake of that painful revelation, I found myself transforming from the silent, defeated husband into a man determined to reclaim his dignity. The moment the truth had struck me, the undeniable evidence of Lauren's secret escapades at Jason's house, my mind began to churn with a single, unwavering thought. I would expose every lie, every deception, and let the truth roar louder than any whispered falsehood. With a background in investigation technology, I realized that I possessed the very skills necessary to turn the tables. I began by meticulously reviewing every Sunday gathering we'd ever attended, noting the precise moments when Lauren would vanish under the guise of grabbing more beer from the garage fridge. The pattern was clear. Each time the clock neared halftime, she would slip away, leaving me to wonder about the mysterious activities hidden behind closed doors. I spent sleepless nights in my study, poring over old security footage and cross-referencing the timeline with subtle clues. The flicker of a phone screen, the hushed tone of her voice when she made her excuses, the almost imperceptible pause in her laughter. "This is it," I murmured to myself during one particularly long night, the glow of my computer screen reflecting the steely determination in my eyes. "I know exactly what's been happening, and it's time to make everyone see it." With a plan beginning to form, I set out to gather the final, irrefutable evidence. My idea was both daring and calculated. At the next Sunday football game at Jason's house, I would replace the live television feed on the big screen with the hidden GoPro footage I had painstakingly secured in the garage. The installation of the camera was a covert operation in itself. On a chilly Friday evening, I arrived at Jason's house early, my heart pounding with anticipation and a tinge of apprehension. I slipped into the garage under the cover of darkness, my steps measured and deliberate. The space was quiet, the hum of the refrigerator in the background a constant reminder of the secrets it now guarded alongside the stored beer. I found the perfect hiding spot for the small GoPro, a nook behind a stack of old boxes and forgotten holiday decorations. With a few swift adjustments, I ensured that the camera had an unobstructed view of the entire garage. Just a few more tweaks, and you'll reveal everything, I whispered, my fingers working with precision. I then connected the camera to my remote device, setting it to activate at precisely the moment Lauren would normally slip away. In the days leading up to the game, I rehearsed every possible scenario, running through my plan like a well-oiled machine. My mind oscillated between anxiety and a fierce resolve, each thought reinforcing that this was not about petty revenge but about reclaiming my honor. I contacted a trusted friend from the local security community to double-check the integrity of my setup. "You've got this, Chris," he reassured me over a hushed phone call, his voice imbued with the confidence of someone who had seen too many injustices go unpunished. Once that footage goes public, there'll be no turning back. I knew that the moment of truth would come during the next game's halftime, when the chatter of excited fans and the roar of the crowd would provide the perfect cover for my revelation. Every detail had been accounted for, the exact timing, the concealed camera angles, even the remote control to switch the television feed seamlessly from the live game to the damning evidence stored on my device. As the day approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of a revolution in my own life. This is for every moment of silence, every slight that I endured, I confided to myself as I made one final check of my equipment. With the plan set in motion, I returned home with a mingling of dread and exhilaration. I knew that by exposing Lauren's betrayal in front of all our friends, I would irrevocably change the course of my life, no matter how painful the fallout might be. In that final moment before the game, as I reviewed the footage and made sure every connection was secure, I realized that I had finally taken back control of my story. The gears of justice were in motion, and I was ready to let the truth shine bright, revealing a deception that had haunted me for too long and paving the way for a future built on integrity and self-respect. I arrived at the upscale restaurant on a chilly evening, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and grim determination. I had spent weeks gathering every scrap of evidence and meticulously planning this moment, knowing that confronting Lauren in front of her lover would finally force the truth into the harsh light of day. As I stepped through the revolving doors, the soft hum of conversation and clinking of glasses filled the air, a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. I scanned the room, searching for any sign of her, until my eyes landed on a secluded table in a quiet corner where she sat with Jason. The sight of them together, Lauren, elegantly dressed with an air of misplaced confidence, and Jason, casually charming, sent a surge of conflicting emotions through me. Every moment of deceit, every whispered excuse about grabbing more beer during our Sunday football gatherings, converged into this singular, painful reality. I took a deep breath and approached their table with deliberate calm, the weight of my long-held suffering and meticulous planning guiding every step. As I neared, the murmur of their conversation faltered, and both Lauren and Jason turned their attention toward me in startled unison. I slid into the chair across from them without invitation, the sudden intrusion slicing through the pretense of normalcy. Lauren's eyes widened in shock, and Jason's confident facade wavered for a brief moment as I began to speak. "Lauren," I said, my voice measured yet laced with the raw intensity of months of hidden hurt, "I've seen everything." The words hung in the air as a heavy silence enveloped our table, the surrounding chatter fading into a distant murmur. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while Lauren's expression wavered between anger and betrayal. "What are you talking about, Chris?" she demanded, her tone forced and defensive. I met her gaze steadily, the evidence of her deception burning behind my eyes. "You've been living a lie, Lauren. Every Sunday, while I sat with our friends, you disappeared, excused by a simple trip to get more beer. And now, here you are with Jason, as if nothing is wrong. My words cut through the air, each syllable echoing with the pain of years spent in silence. Jason opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, silencing any immediate retort. I've recorded every moment, every false promise, every betrayal. I continued quietly, and I won't allow you to continue diminishing who I am or the trust that once held our family together. The tension at the table was palpable, every eye in the restaurant seemingly fixed on our confrontation. Lauren's face flushed, a cocktail of anger and despair overtaking her features. "You think this makes you better?" she spat, her voice trembling as she tried to maintain control. "You think exposing me here will fix your broken pride?" I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering as I delivered the final blow. "No, Lauren," I said firmly, "it's not about pride, it's about truth. You've betrayed me and our family, and tonight, everyone will know the cost of your deception." A stunned silence fell over the table as murmurs rippled among the nearby patrons. Jason's eyes darted nervously between us, while Lauren's expression contorted with a mix of anger and regret. For a long, heavy moment, I let the silence speak for the years of neglect and pain. Then, with a final glance at the woman I once loved, a woman who had chosen a path of dishonesty, I stood up. "Now you've really lost the game," I said softly, echoing the bitter irony of our shattered lives. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away from the table, each step carrying me further from the life I once knew and closer to a future defined by integrity. The restaurant's atmosphere shifted as whispers and shocked glances followed me out the door, and as I stepped into the cool night air, I felt both victorious and hollow, aware that the wreckage left behind was the price of finally reclaiming my dignity. I returned home that night, feeling numb and disoriented, each step toward the front door weighted by the echoes of our shattered lives. The confrontation at the restaurant still reverberated in my mind, every word a reminder of the betrayal and the long years of humiliation I had endured. The house felt emptier than ever, its familiar walls now echoing with silence instead of comfort. I sat in the living room, trying to piece together the fragments of my thoughts, when I heard the slow, deliberate sound of the door opening. In walked Lauren, her expression a tumult of fury and desperation, as if she were trying to salvage what little control she had left. Without waiting for me to speak, she launched into an angry tirade. "Chris, how dare you do this to us?" she cried, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and panic. "You think you can just walk out and ruin everything? You're being completely unreasonable." I remained silent for a moment, my heart pounding as I listened to the venom in her words. I had reached a point where every accusation she hurled was met with a calm resolve that had taken months to cultivate. "Lauren," I said quietly, meeting her gaze without flinching, "this isn't about being unreasonable. It's about finally acknowledging the truth." Her eyes flashed with indignation as she stepped closer, her voice rising in a desperate plea. "The truth? You're twisting everything. I was doing what needed to be done. I was trying to keep our lives interesting, to keep things moving forward while you just sat there, obsessed with your precious little game." Her words stung, but they no longer had the power to break me. I took a slow, deep breath, centering myself. I've spent years feeling invisible, feeling like every effort I made was just a background noise to your ambitions. "You've made me feel less than I am, less than I deserve to be," I replied, each word steady and measured, refusing to let her gaslight me any longer. Lauren's face contorted with a mix of anger and something that might have been regret, but she quickly masked it with further accusations. "Oh, so now you're the martyr? The victim of some grand injustice?" She sneered. "Maybe if you had been more supportive, if you had put in some effort instead of wallowing in self-pity, we wouldn't be in this mess." I shook my head, the weight of her words failing to reach the newfound strength within me. "I supported you, Lauren. I listened, I sacrificed, and I stood by you even when your actions made me question everything. But this constant belittlement, the sneering comments in front of our friends, it has worn me down. I'm not the man I once was, and I refuse to be diminished any longer." For a moment, the air crackled with tension as Lauren's eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape from the reality I was laying bare. "You're making a mistake, Chris. You're throwing away everything for what? Pride? This isn't pride, it's stubbornness. We can fix this, we can work it out. Don't leave. Don't do something you'll regret," she pleaded, her tone softening just enough to betray a trace of desperation. I looked at her, the woman I had once believed in, and felt a sorrow that mingled with a deep, resolute determination. "Lauren, I've made my decision. I can't continue living in a house filled with lies and constant disrespect. I've given my all, and what I got in return was manipulation and humiliation. I'm done." Her eyes filled with unshed tears, but the anger returned quickly as she tried one last time to pull me back. "Please, Chris, think about our family, our life together." I stood, my heart heavy yet unburdened by the weight of my choice. "I have thought about it," I said, my voice unwavering, "and I know that leaving is the only way I can start to rebuild the person I lost." As I walked to the door, I glanced back one last time. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the distant echo of her sobs and the harsh realization that this was truly the end of our shared chapter. With each step away from that door, I felt a mix of grief and liberation, a bittersweet step toward a future where my worth would no longer be defined by her manipulation. I grabbed my coat, paused for a moment in the dim light of the hallway, and then stepped outside into the crisp night, leaving behind the wreckage of a marriage that had long been in ruins. I spent the next few weeks immersed in a world of legal paperwork and cold, hard meetings, each day drawing me further away from the life I once knew and deeper into a realm where truth and evidence reigned supreme. I began by organizing every scrap of evidence I had accumulated, the recordings, the meticulous logs of Lauren's whereabouts, and the moments of humiliation that had defined our relationship, all compiled into a dossier that I hoped would serve as the cornerstone of my case. One chilly morning, I found myself sitting in a cramped conference room at a modest law firm, my hands trembling slightly as I spread the documents across the table in front of my attorney. His keen eyes scanned the files, and after a long, measured silence, he spoke. "Chris, this is solid. Every detail here paints a clear picture of deception. We have everything we need to challenge the narrative they've built." His words, though measured, injected a surge of determination into me. I had spent so many years questioning my worth and my sanity, and now here was proof that the pain I had endured was not just in my head. It was real, and it was documented. In the following days, I attended multiple sessions at the courthouse, each visit chipping away at the facade that had once kept me chained to a life of constant belittlement. I remember sitting in the witness stand during one particularly grueling session, my heart pounding as I recounted the moments of neglect and humiliation. Every word I uttered was a reclaiming of the dignity that had been stripped from me over years of silent suffering. I trusted her. I stated clearly, my voice resonating in the silent courtroom, and every sacrifice I made was met with contempt and lies. The judge's steady gaze and the murmurs from those present lent weight to my testimony, a silent affirmation that the truth was finally taking shape in this legal arena. Even as Lauren's legal team tried to twist the narrative, portraying me as a bitter, overreacting husband incapable of seeing beyond his own pain, I maintained a calm resolve. I stand by every word I've said. I declared during a tense cross-examination, my voice unwavering despite the flicker of doubt that sometimes threatened to resurface. The evidence speaks for itself, and it shows a pattern of manipulation that I can no longer live with. Outside the courtroom, whispers of support began to circulate among friends and acquaintances who had once witnessed my quiet suffering. Former colleagues and even some family members reached out, their words of encouragement a balm to my wounded pride. "You're doing the right thing, Chris," one friend texted, his brief message loaded with understanding and solidarity. With every meeting and every piece of evidence presented, the scales of justice began to tip in my favor. I felt a burgeoning confidence, a sense of empowerment that grew with each documented lie and each carefully recorded conversation. The legal battle was not just a fight for retribution. It was a fight for my identity, for the acknowledgement that I deserved to be seen, respected, and treated with the dignity that had been so long denied to me. On one memorable day, in a meeting with the attorneys representing both sides, I laid out my case in painstaking detail. "I have spent years collecting this evidence," I said firmly, my eyes locking with those of the opposing counsel. "And today, I present it not just as a testament to my suffering, but as undeniable proof of a pattern of deceit." The room fell silent as the weight of my words settled in, and even those on the other side could not ignore the clear truth before them. With each passing day, the legal process, as arduous as it was, became a catalyst for my transformation, from a man crushed by humiliation to one who had found the strength to stand up for himself. I left each session with a newfound clarity, convinced that justice was not only possible but inevitable. The case was underway, and as I drove home after another long day in court, the cool night air carried with it a promise that the wreckage of the past would soon give way to a future built on honesty, respect, and the reclamation of my own self-worth. I stepped into my new apartment on a crisp autumn morning, the smell of fresh paint and new beginnings mingling in the air as I set down the last of my boxes. Every corner of this modest space spoke of a fresh start, one that promised a life built on truth and self-respect rather than the ashes of betrayal. The first few days were quiet. I spent my mornings sipping coffee while my kids, their laughter echoing in the halls, reminded me that even in the midst of heartache there could be hope. Reconnecting with my career as a private investigator had taken on new meaning now. I began to take on cases with a renewed sense of purpose. My work no longer just a means to an end, but a way to reclaim the dignity I had lost. Every successful case bolstered my confidence, and I soon found myself rising to challenges that once seemed insurmountable. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a particularly complex investigation, I received a call from an old friend in the industry. "Chris, I've heard good things about your recent work," he said, his tone warm and genuine. "It sounds like you're really turning things around." His words felt like a balm to my wounded pride, affirming that the steps I had taken were right. Even as I embraced the opportunities that came with my new life, I kept a discreet eye on the fallout from Lauren's actions. It wasn't long before news began to spread, whispers among our former circle that her carefully curated world was unraveling. I caught snippets of conversations on the street, and I even received a message from a mutual friend who said, "I'm sorry to hear about Lauren. It seems like everything is coming apart for her." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction, though it was tempered by the bittersweet understanding that my freedom had come at a cost. At home, my children and I spent evenings rediscovering the simple joys of life, cooking dinner together, playing board games, and taking long walks in the park. Their innocent laughter filled the void that had once been occupied by tension and uncertainty, and with every shared smile, I felt the heavy chains of my past loosening. One particularly serene night, as I sat on the balcony watching the stars emerge, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. The pain of betrayal had been immense, but in its wake, it had cleared the path for self-discovery and healing. "This is the life I was meant to live," I whispered to myself, a gentle affirmation that resonated with the cool night air. My work, my children, and the quiet moments of solitude had all contributed to a growing realization. Leaving Lauren was not an act of defeat, but a courageous step toward reclaiming my identity. I started to reach out more to old friends, rekindling relationships that had been overshadowed by the toxicity of my previous life. Each encounter reminded me that I was not defined by the betrayal I had suffered, but by the strength it took to move forward. I even began volunteering at a local community center, sharing my experiences with others who had faced similar hardships. And in doing so, I found solace in knowing that my struggles could become a beacon of hope for someone else. In those moments of connection, I felt a powerful sense of belonging, a reassurance that I was not alone on this journey. While Lauren's once perfect facade continued to crumble under the weight of public scrutiny and lost friendships, I found a sense of quiet satisfaction in my new beginning. The man who had once felt invisible had now emerged with clarity and purpose. As the days turned into weeks, I realized that every sacrifice, every painful memory had led me to this defining moment. I smiled softly to myself, knowing that the decision to leave had been the best choice I ever made. Now, surrounded by the warmth of genuine relationships, the fulfillment of meaningful work, and the unfiltered love of my children, I embraced a future where my worth was recognized and my life was finally my own. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.